Hi, welcome to my channel, Math Made Easy with Laurel. I'm Laurel, and in this video we're going to talk about dividing decimals. Dividing decimals is the most challenging operation when you're working with decimal numbers. But if you understand how to divide with whole numbers, then you will probably be able to understand division with decimal numbers fairly easily. It's a very similar process. It's just a matter of dealing with the decimal point. So before we start, I just want to talk about the terminology because I will be using the terminology when I'm talking. The number that divides into something else is called the divisor. The number that's being divided is called the dividend. And the answer or the result of that division is called the quotient. So when I use those words, you will understand what I'm referring to. And if you have a division, you're going to want to set it up in this form. So let's take this question here, 0.1575 divided by 0.006. So this is what it will look like, and we're looking for the quotient. But the rule is you cannot have a decimal point in your divisor. You need to get rid of that. And the way that you're going to get rid of it is you're going to basically multiply by 1,000. And if you multiply your divisor by 1,000, you have to do the same thing with your dividend. It's just like with fractions. If I had this in fraction form, if I had it 0.1575 divided by 0.006, the idea is you do not want a decimal in the denominator. So what we're going to do in order to get rid of that decimal point, we have to multiply by 1,000. Whatever you do to the denominator, you do the same thing to the numerator. So we're doing the same process, it's just that it's in this form. So I'm going to take this decimal point and I'm going to move it 3 places. So it's at the end of my number. I have to do the same thing with this decimal point. I have to move it 3 places. I have to multiply by 1,000. So there's my new decimal point. I'm going to rewrite this question without all of the lines in there. So basically what we're going to be dividing is 157.5 by 6. So your first step is to get rid of the decimal point in your divisor. Whatever number of places you move the decimal point in your divisor, you have to move the same number in your dividend. Now we start off dividing the way we would normally. 6 goes into 1, no it doesn't. 6 goes into 15, yes it does, 2 times. So 6 times 2 is 12. We subtract, and then we bring down the next digit. 6 into 37 is 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36, and then we subtract. Now, before I bring down my next digit, there's a decimal point here, so there will be a decimal point in my quotient as well. Now I can bring down that 5. So 6 goes into 15 2 times. 2 times 6 is 12. We subtract. We want to bring down another digit. There isn't a digit here, so we understand that digit is 0. Bring down that 0. 6 divides into 30 5 times. 5 times 6 is 30. We subtract. We have 0, so we're done. So this quotient, 0.1575 divided by 0.006, will equal 26.25. But we need to get rid of the decimal point in our divisor before we can divide. And then we just pay attention to where the decimal point is in the dividend to know where it is in the quotient. Let's try a couple more examples. Be careful when you say what's being divided by what. It's not 0.12 being divided by 5. 5 is being divided by 0.12. This is like the denominator or the divisor. First step, we eliminate the decimal point in our divisor. So we're going to move it 2 places. And if we move it 2 places in the divisor, we have to move it 2 places in the dividend. There's no decimal point there, so it follows the number. And we move it 2 places, which means we have zeros in as placeholders. So this question, if we got rid of those lines, and now we proceed paying attention to where our decimal point is in our dividend. 12 does not go into 5, but 12 goes into 50. So we put our number, our quotient above the last digit of the number we're dividing into. So we're dividing into 50. 12 goes into 50 4 times, so the 4 goes over that end of that number or the last digit of that number. 4 times 12 is 48. We subtract, bring down the next digit. 12 goes into 20 one time. 1 times 12 is 12. We subtract. Then, before we bring down the next digit, we're going into the decimal value. Make sure you put your decimal point in the quotient above where it is in the dividend. And then we can put as many zeros there as we need. We bring down the first one. Notice that I don't put the decimal point in as I'm doing my calculations. I'm keeping track of my decimal point right there. So now I brought down this digit, so whatever I choose as my quotient, it goes right above that 0 after the decimal point. So 12 goes into 80 6 times. 12 times 6 is 72. We subtract, we get 8. Bring down a 0. Hopefully you notice that we're just going to keep repeating. 12 goes into 80 6 times. 6 times 12 is 72. We subtract, bring down the next 0, and so on. So we don't have to continue on. We can see that repetition. So we would say our answer is 41.6 repeating, or we could say it's 41.7 if we're rounding off to the nearest tenth, or we can say it's 41.67 if we're rounding off to the nearest hundredth, or 41.667, and so on. So depending on where you're going to round off or how you're expected to express your answer, one of these options will work for you. Let's try one last example. We're dividing 65.535 by 1.02. We can't have a decimal point in our divisor, so we're going to move it over 2 places. We do the same thing with our decimal point in our dividend. If I get rid of all the marks there, it's like I'm dividing 102 into 6,553.5. So we start off with, does 102 divide into 6? No. 65? No. 655? Yes. So I put my quotient above the last digit. 102 goes into 655 6 times. Then I multiply 6 times 102, which will be 612. Subtract. Bring down the next digit. 102 goes into 433 4 times. And that will be 408. Subtract. Now before I bring down my next digit, I need to put a decimal point in my quotient. Bring down the 5. 102 into 255 2 times, which is 204. Subtract. The next digit I'm going to bring down is a 0. 102 into 510, 5 times, and I'm done. We're done here because we have a difference of 0. But if we had another number, we could continue bringing down zeros as needed and find our quotient to as many decimal places as necessary. So make sure you practice this. Make sure you understand how to do division with whole numbers first. And then when you get into decimal numbers, just remember that your divisor cannot have a decimal point, so you move the decimal point as many places as necessary in the divisor, and you move it the same number in your dividend, and then just pay attention to where the decimal point is in your quotient. But you will get better if you practice.